All right, are you ready for a deep dive?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Today, we're looking at Ahmed Hulusi's The Renewal, Islam and the New Age.
Interesting choice.
It is, right. And, Hulusi, he kind of positions himself as this, modern interpreter of Islamic teachings.
Yeah, I've heard a bit about him. He's known for shaking things up.
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit. He's got some thought-provoking ideas, for sure, and that's what we are diving into today.
Sounds good. Where do we even begin with a title like that?
Well, right off the bat, one of the first things that jumped out at me was he challenges the traditional, God in space idea.
Yeah, that's a pretty core concept in many religions.
It is, but he's like, wait, science is telling us the universe is vast, potentially infinite. So where does this, external, all-powerful God actually reside?
So is he saying there's no God? Is he an atheist?
No, not exactly. He's not denying the existence of a higher power, but he's questioning the traditional way we conceive of it. If God is everywhere, does it even make sense to talk about God being in a specific location?
Ah, I see. So he's pushing for a more expansive view of the divine. Where does he suggest this power comes from then?
Well, he believes that power resides within each individual.
Oh, interesting. So it's more of an internal thing.
Exactly. He even draws on this Quranic verse. It says, there is no animate being that he does not hold, program with the name Fatir by its forehead, brain.
So he's connecting the forehead to the brain, highlighting its role in shaping reality.
Right. He's basically saying that we have the potential to shape our own reality, that the power isn't out there somewhere, it's within us.
That's pretty empowering. It's not some distant God controlling everything, but us humans having a hand in shaping our lives.
Exactly. And that's kind of where this idea of renewal in Islam comes in, at least according to Hulusi. He thinks we need to move past these literal interpretations of religious texts and embrace a more scientific and experiential approach.
So it's not about clinging to old dogma, but about applying these teachings to our modern understanding of the world. I like that.
Yeah. And he even points to scientific discoveries, things like the splitting of the atom, which happened, what was it, maybe 60 years or so before he wrote the book?
Oh, wow. So he sees this as a major turning point. It's time to update our understanding of the universe.
Exactly. It's like he's saying, hey, we can't just stick to these old interpretations when our understanding of how things work is constantly evolving, right?
Right. It makes sense. If our knowledge is expanding, our understanding of our faith should expand too.
Okay, so we've got this idea of a renewed Islam where power resides within, and we need to embrace both science and experience. What else does Hulusi shake up?
Well, how about something as simple as ablution?
Ablution, you mean the ritual washing before prayer?
Yep, that's the one. Hulusi throws a curveball and argues that it's not about ritual purification, but about bioelectrical neutralization.
Hold on, bioelectrical what?
He suggests that rubbing water, or even dirt, on the body can neutralize static energy.
Wait, so we're walking around with static cling and washing ourselves helps discharge it?
Well, kind of. He sees it as a way to reduce stress on the brain.
Wow. So not just spiritual cleansing, but a practical technique for well-being.
That's his take.
Yeah.
He views a lot of Islamic practices through this lens of practicality and science.
Okay, so that's definitely a different way to look at ablution. What other traditional ideas does he challenge?
His views on Sharia law are particularly interesting.
Oh, I bet.
He straight up believes that a Sharia-based government is just impossible in today's world.
Really impossible.
Yeah, impossible. Given how many different interpretations of Islamic law there are, he just doesn't see how it could work. He even says that if a Sharia government were possible, there wouldn't be a single believer left on earth.
Wow. That's a pretty strong statement. So he's not just saying it's impractical, he's saying it would actually backfire.
That's his argument. He believes imposing one strict interpretation on everyone would only lead to more conflict, not less.
Okay, so we've got this renewed Islam, power within, unconventional takes on ablution and Sharia law. Where else does Hulusi go from here?
Well, remember how he rejects that God in space concept?
Yeah.
He actually points to Taoism as a belief system that aligns with his view. Taoism talks about consciousness as the eye of an indivisible wholeness.
Interesting.
Instead of this external God figure, it's more about consciousness as the source of creation,
So he's drawing inspiration from other spiritual traditions.
It seems so. He's weaving together ideas from different sources to create a more expansive view of reality. He's definitely not limiting himself to just one way of thinking.
Okay, but how does he relate this back to Islam?
He connects this idea of consciousness to the Islamic concept of Akbariya, which emphasizes that Allah is beyond our comprehension.
Oh, I see. So instead of trying to define God, he's embracing the mystery.
Exactly. Allah, or the ultimate reality, is beyond labels and limitations, beyond our ability to grasp or define. It's a pretty big shift from that image of an all-knowing, all-powerful God who's controlling everything from up above. Right.
It is. It's more about recognizing the interconnectedness of everything and how that connects back to this source that we can't even fully grasp.
Right. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Hulusi has even more thought-provoking ideas about inner transformation, the Quran, and even things like death and the afterlife.
Well, it sounds like we've got a lot more to unpack.
We do. This is just the beginning of our deep dive into Ahmed Hulusi's The Renewal, Islam and the New Age.
All right, so we're back, and we're diving even deeper into Ahmed Hulusi's The Renewal, Islam and the New Age.
You know, it's amazing how he takes these really complex Islamic ideas
Yeah.
and then kind of connects them with modern science and even his own personal experiences.
It is. It's making me think about things in a whole new light. Like, what does it actually mean to have faith in today's world?
Exactly. He really challenges that idea of blind faith. He's all about that journey of inner transformation.
Speaking of which, he brings up this Islamic concept of tawhid, the oneness of God.
Yeah, tawhid is a core principle in Islam. It's about recognizing the absolute unity of God.
So what's Hulusi's take on it?
Well, he suggests that understanding this oneness means understanding that Allah isn't separate from creation, but is actually the source of all existence. He describes it as a point that expands into infinite dimensions.
So instead of God being separate from us, it's more like we are all part of this divine oneness.
Right, exactly. It's like we're all connected to this ultimate source, this infinite point of energy that expands into everything that exists.
That reminds me of that phrase, Allahu Akbar, which is often translated as God is great. Does he address that phrase?
He does. He suggests that Akbar doesn't just mean great in the sense of size or power, but rather beyond comprehension. He's saying that Allah is so vast, so all-encompassing, that our human minds just can't fully grasp it.
So it's not about God being big, like physically big, but about a greatness that goes beyond our limited understanding.
Exactly. It's a greatness that surpasses our categories, our labels, our ways of trying to contain it.
Okay, so that makes sense. And it ties back to his point about rejecting that whole God in space concept.
Right, because if Allah is the source of everything, trying to limit that power to a specific place doesn't really make sense.
So where does he go from there? What else does he explore?
Well, this idea of oneness leads him into a discussion of the relationship between the material and spiritual realms. He says these realms aren't separate, but are actually different dimensions of the same reality.
Different dimensions of the same reality. Okay, now we're getting into some mind-bending territory.
It is a bit trippy.
Yeah.
But he explains it in a way that makes sense. He talks about how matter, as we perceive it, is just a manifestation of energy at a specific frequency. And our brains act like converters, taking those energy waves and turning them into sensory experiences, sight, sound, touch, taste, smell, all of that.
So our brains are basically interpreting this sea of energy and creating our own unique version of reality based on how we're picking up those waves.
That's the idea. And he even points to scientific research on brain waves and how they interact with each other. He says this is evidence that we're all interconnected through this field of energy.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all ties together. So if we're all part of this interconnected web of energy, how does that connect back to Islam?
Well, he argues that practices like salawat, which is sending blessings to the Prophet Muhammad, can actually tap into this interconnectedness.
Hold on, sending blessings to someone who's passed away allows us to connect with their energy. How does that work?
He believes our brains are capable of resonating with the energy of others, even those who have passed on, through the mechanism of mirror neurons. Remember, we talked about those earlier.
Yeah, I remember. So it's not just about a spiritual connection in the abstract sense.
Right. He's actually proposing a neurological basis for this type of connection. He's grounding it in the way our brains work. He believes it's a very real, tangible phenomenon.
Wow. Okay, this is getting pretty deep, but it's also fascinating.
It is. And this idea of interconnectedness has big implications for how he sees the afterlife, too. He believes that the quality of our eternal journey, as he puts it, is determined by our understanding of reality in this life.
So basically, how we live our lives now has a direct impact on what happens after we die.
Exactly. It's not just about following rules and hoping for a reward. It's about expanding our consciousness and deepening our understanding of the universe. He believes that this understanding is what shapes our experience after death.
It's a pretty big shift from the traditional idea of heaven and hell, isn't it?
Yeah, he's not saying that those things don't exist, but he's offering a different perspective on what they might actually be. He believes we're constantly creating our own realities, both in this life and in the afterlife.
So it's not some external judgment we have to worry about, but how we're shaping our own internal reality.
That's how he sees it.
Yeah.
He believes we're ultimately judging ourselves based on how well we live in accordance with our true nature, our fitra, and whether we're fulfilling our unique potential.
That's a powerful message. It really puts the responsibility on us to figure out what our potential is and how we can live up to it.
It does. And that connects to his interpretation of salat, the 5 daily prayers.
Yeah.
He doesn't see them as just ritualistic performances, but as a way to connect with that inner reality.
But Salat is so structured, with specific postures and recitations. How does he reconcile that with this idea of an inner connection?
He believes the true essence of prayer is about intention and sincerity. It's about mindfulness and the state of your heart. He even suggests that salat can be done without the traditional physical forms if your heart is truly engaged.
So it's not just about going through the motions, but about cultivating that inner connection, that sense of oneness with Allah.
Exactly. And this focus on inner transformation extends to his interpretation of taqwa, which is often translated as piety or God consciousness.
Okay, so what's his take on taqwa?
He describes it as a state of awareness and self-restraint, like a shield that protects you from negative influences.
So it's about more than just avoiding sin.
Right. It's about purifying your heart and aligning your actions with your higher purpose. And it's not just about what you do externally, but about cultivating a positive internal state. He emphasizes the importance of intention.
So it's a pretty active process, right? It's not just about following a set of rules. It's about consciously choosing to live in a certain way.
Exactly. And this idea of taqwa connects to another really important concept in Islam, jihad.
Jihad is one of those words that gets thrown around a lot, often in a very negative and violent context. What does Hulusi have to say about it?
He argues that the true jihad is the struggle against your own ego, all those negative tendencies we all have.
So the real battle isn't against some external enemy, but against our own internal demons.
He believes it's the most important battle we'll ever face, and that winning this battle is the key to spiritual liberation.
So it's not about violence or aggression, but about self-improvement and overcoming our own inner obstacles.
Right, and he believes the rewards of this inner jihad are things like peace, contentment, and a deep connection with Allah.
It sounds like Hulusi's interpretation of Islam is all about personal transformation and finding that inner peace.
It is. But it's not a passive process. It requires effort, self-awareness, and a constant willingness to examine your own thoughts and actions. He's challenging us to really take responsibility for our own spiritual growth.
It's not about blindly following rules or hoping for external rewards, but about doing the inner work. It's about understanding yourself and the universe in a deeper way.
Exactly. And that's why he emphasizes the importance of seeking knowledge. It's not just about religious knowledge either. He encourages us to be curious about everything, to learn as much as we can about the world around us.
Because understanding the world around us helps us understand ourselves, right?
Right. And that understanding is what ultimately leads to that inner transformation he's talking about. He believes that the more we learn, the more we grow, the closer we get to that state of oneness with Allah.
Wow. Okay. This is a lot to take in. But it's also incredibly inspiring. It makes me want to go out and learn more, to explore different ideas, and to see the world in a new light.
That's the beauty of Hulusi's work. He challenges you to think for yourself, to question your assumptions, and to never stop seeking knowledge.
You know, after diving into this book, I can't help but think about, the power of reinterpreting ancient texts for our modern world.
Yeah, it's like finding hidden treasures within something you thought you already knew.
Exactly. It's like breathing fresh life into these old ideas. It's like he's saying, don't let these teachings gather dust on a shelf. Apply them. Make them relevant to your life right now.
That's a great point. He's all about bringing these ancient teachings into the present moment. And one of the ways he does that is through his discussion of fitra, which is like an individual's natural disposition, unique qualities and potential that we're each born with.
Right, that inherent blueprint that guides our path in life.
Exactly. And this idea of fitra ties into his whole take on predetermination, that age-old question of free will versus destiny.
Yeah, that's a topic that's always fascinated me. What's Hulusi's take on it?
He believes we do have free will, but it operates within certain parameters. He brings back that camel with mange analogy. Remember that?
Oh yeah, the camel with mange was such a striking image.
Right. He says, think about it. The camel can roam freely, but that mange limits how far it can go. It influences its actions.
So our choices are kind of like that camel, influenced by factors that are beyond our control, right?
Right, exactly. Our mange might be our genetics, our upbringing, or even just the circumstances we find ourselves in. But within those limitations, we still have the power to choose.
So it's not a black and white issue. It's not like we either have complete free will or we're just puppets of fate.
Exactly. It's a more nuanced perspective.
Yeah.
And this is where the concept of qadar comes in. That Islamic idea of fate or divine decree.
Yeah, that's always seemed like a bit of a head scratcher to me. Like if everything is already decided, what's the point of even trying?
Well, Hulusi presents a really interesting interpretation of qadar. He says, imagine it like a book with all the possibilities for your life already written in it. The pages are there, but you get to choose which ones you turn, which paths you take.
Oh, I like that. So it's not a fixed story, but more like a choose your own adventure.
Right. The possibilities might be predetermined, but you get to make choices within that framework. You have the power to shape the narrative of your life.
That makes so much more sense. And it also puts a different spin on the idea of judgment, right?
It does. He believes that the day of judgment isn't some far-off event, but a continuous process that's happening throughout your life. And you're not being judged by some external force. You're constantly being evaluated by yourself. Like, how are you living up to your fitra? Are you fulfilling your unique potential?
So it's not about pleasing God or avoiding hell. It's about being true to yourself.
Exactly. And that ties into his interpretation of salat, the 5 daily prayers. He sees it as a way to connect with your inner reality, to align yourself with that divine source. It's like a spiritual check-in, a way to reconnect with your purpose.
But Salat is so structured with all those specific movements and recitations.
He acknowledges that. But he emphasizes that the true essence of prayer lies in your intention and your state of heart. It's not about the outward form, but about the inward connection.
So you could say that Salat can be done anytime, anywhere, as long as you're cultivating that inner awareness.
That's how he sees it. He encourages us to find that space for prayer, that connection with the divine, in whatever way works for us.
Okay, so we've talked about Sipra, Qadar, Salat. Are there any other key concepts he touches on that you think are worth highlighting?
Well, he talks a lot about the idea of taqwa, which is often translated as piety or God consciousness, right? But Hulusi describes it as a state of awareness and self-restraint, like a shield that protects you from negative influences.
So it's not just about avoiding what's considered sinful.
Right, it's deeper than that. It's about purifying your heart, aligning your actions with your higher purpose. He's talking about that inner work we were just discussing earlier.
It's about taking responsibility for your thoughts, words, and actions.
Yeah.
It's about being mindful and intentional in everything you do.
Exactly, and this idea of taqwa leads him into a discussion of jihad. But not the kind of jihad that we usually hear about in the media. He's not talking about violence or war.
So what does he mean by jihad?
He says that true jihad is about struggling against your own ego, your own negative tendencies. It's that inner battle we all face, the one against fear, greed, anger, jealousy, all that stuff.
The stuff that keeps us from reaching our full potential.
Exactly. He believes that conquering those inner demons is the most important battle we'll ever fight.
And that winning that battle is the key to true liberation.
That's what he believes. He sees the rewards of this inner jihad as peace, contentment, and a deep connection with Allah. But it's not an easy path. It requires constant effort and self-reflection.
Well, I think that's a message that resonates with a lot of people, regardless of their religious beliefs.
Right.
It's about taking responsibility for our own happiness and well-being. It's about striving to be the best versions of ourselves.
And that's really at the heart of Hulusi's message, right? He's encouraging us to move beyond dogma and blind faith, to engage with these ancient teachings in a way that's meaningful and relevant to our lives today.
So after this deep dive into Hulusi's unique perspective, what do you think? Is it time to renew your own understanding of the world and the power within?
Remember, Hulusi's interpretation is just one among many. It's important to explore different viewpoints and continue seeking knowledge from various sources. If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to delve deeper into Hulusi's work or research other interpretations of the Quran and Islamic teachings. The journey of understanding is a lifelong adventure, and there's always more to discover. And that's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive, right? Exploring new ideas, challenging our assumptions, and expanding our understanding of the world around us.
So until next time, keep diving.